Fried rice is one of the easiest things you'll ever make in the kitchen. While it seems daunting at first, you can take almost anything in your kitchen and still turn out with a delicious, cheap, and healthy meal. So without further ado, let's head down to the kitchen and see what we're gonna need to make today's meal. Now before you get to cutting anything, you want to make sure your knife is sharp, so all you need to do is test it against your fingernail, and if any shavings of nail come off, you're good to go. And look at that, safe and no injury. Now to contend with our pork, we're going to start by cutting it off into about 1-inch wide strips, and then further cutting it into cubes, as uniform as you can so it doesn't overcook. You don't want any undercooked or those gray, kind of gross, pallid, overcooked pieces in your fried rice. Now, while I'm using pork here, you can use whatever protein you like or just have around the house. Chicken, beef, turkey even will work just great in fried rice. It's just important that everything's cut relatively uniform so nothing is over or undercooked. Now getting to our vegetables, we're going to take a bell pepper, kind of toss that around, make sure it's good. It is. And we're going to hack the top, not quite actually. There's a better way to do this, which is cutting off each individual rib of the bell pepper instead of cutting into the whole thing. That way we're going to get less of the pith and less of the seeds, as well as use more of the bell pepper. It might be tempting to cut into the waxy backside of the pepper, but it's going to be a lot easier on you and on your knife if you just cut into the inside of it. It seems a little counterproductive, but trust me, this works so much better. You're just going to chop the pepper up into little bits. Nothing crazy, just again, somewhat uniform. Clean that little pith out just to make sure everything cooks relatively evenly. Now, most people seem to have a pretty hard time cutting onions because they're like ogres. They have a lot of layers. So I'm going to teach you a really easy way to dice an onion up. We're going to cut it in half, we're going to cut this top part off, but leave the kind of root part on the back. Clean all that off, and we're going to cut the onion in half from the top down, and then make little incisions like I'm doing here. And that way you can very easily chop the onion up. Super simple. Get all of it, get all the good stuff on the end as well. Don't want to waste your onion. And then because it wasn't the cleanest cuts, I'm just going to get all this chopped up again. And there you go. You have half of a diced onion in about 30 seconds. Now we're going to make our way over to the stove where we have our wok preheating with just a little bit of spray in it so our eggs don't stick. And we're going to crack a couple times because I can't seem to get it out. There we go. And okay, that's fine. Eggshells add a little flavor. And here comes a second egg. Normally I'd scramble these before, but I've been using way too many dishes, so I just decided I'd scramble them in the pan. And what you're going to want to do is cook them until they just barely set. You don't want to have these all the way cooked because they'll cook when we add them back later. But we're going to cook these till just about they're almost set, and then we're going to take them out so we can add them back in when we're finishing our fried rice off at the end. Now coming back to our slightly eggier pan than before, we're going to add about 2 to 3 tablespoons of sesame oil, which is going to add a really nice kind of nutty flavor. And we're going to toss that all around, coating the entire wok as much as possible, and dumping our pork in. And now we're going to season this with a bit of kosher salt, and then some freshly ground pepper, and just there we go, some freshly ground pepper. And because we don't have any fresh garlic, we're going to use a lot of garlic powder. Now we want all these pieces of pork separate from each other so they can all brown evenly. Now, here's the best part of using a wok. When they are brown on one side, we get to just use the flick of our wrist, just like that, and get most, if not all, of the pieces on their other side so they can start browning. Now, you don't want to cook these all the way through just yet. It's going to cook later as we keep going, but get all the sides nice and brown and crispy. With our pork sufficiently browned, we're going to add our fresh vegetables, in this case the bell pepper and the onion. Now we want to get this all mixed around with the pork, so whatever fat is from the pork as well as any remaining sesame oil can get mixed with it and make these vegetables super soft and nice and tasty. And we're going to add a pinch of kosher salt to help our vegetables soften, and because there's nothing worse than an unseasoned vegetable. With our fresh vegetables cooked, we're now going to pour in our frozen vegetables after we make a hole in the center. And here I'm using peas, carrots, corn, and green beans, but whatever frozen vegetables you have on hand will work just fine with this. Now we're going to just, because they're frozen, mix them all around, get them touching the heat, and get everything just a little more combined. Now for the star of our show, our rice. I'm going to dump in about 2.5 cups of cooked long grain white rice. And this is rice that's been in the fridge for about 12 hours. And you want rice that's cold, at maybe a day old, but at least a couple hours old, and sit in the fridge because it'll be firm and won't mush up when you're cooking it all. There's not a ton else to say about this, so enjoy the music while you watch me mix everything together. When everything is sufficiently combined, we're now going to add soy sauce. And I'm using a low sodium soy sauce, but really you can go nuts here. You can use teriyaki if you want. You can use a normal soy sauce, low sodium, whatever fits your fancy. And I'm going to struggle getting it out, but eventually get enough in there. And we're just going to combine that together until no real white rice remains. You want all of it to pretty much be covered in the soy sauce. And you're pretty much just going to continue mixing until you get as covered as you want. And then we're going to add some more garlic powder because we don't have enough garlic, and then a little bit of ginger, which is going to give it that perfect kind of Asian flavor that goes great with our sesame oil. Now the only thing we have left to do is add a little bit more soy sauce because I didn't feel like there was enough, and we're going to finally add back our eggs that we cooked in the beginning, mix those around, and once all that's combined, you've done it. You've made fried rice in just under half an hour. Now, I did a dramatic shot last time for the mac and cheese, but slow-mo seemed a little more appropriate for something with a wok, so let's take a look at what that looks like.